Hello, Alberta. This is David White, leader of the Freedom Conservative Party of Alberta, and I wanted to spend a few moments with you again to reflect on a few things that have been happening and some suggestions and some insights of some additional considerations we definitely need to take into account for those Albertans who absolutely need it. First, we had a chart that was recently released by our Premier, specifically identifying how grossly contagious COVID 19 was and how desperate the situation was in general. And yet, there are some additional numbers that need to seriously be considered. Here's some of them. Now, what the chart from our Premier noted was that within the first 7 or so weeks, from January 1st through until around April ish, actually, it would have been around March, that the amount of people affected by COVID was so profoundly large that it dwarfed any other medical situation we've ever felt. And that is including the flus, the Spanish epidemics, all these things. And yet the numbers don't pan out. Here are some numbers from January 1st through until April 1st, as far as the number of people who have died, globally speaking. COVID is 46,438. Seasonal flu, 121,993. Malaria, 246,121. Suicide, keep this number in mind because I'm going to be coming back to it, 269,076. Traffic fatalities, 328,715. HIV/AIDS, 421,808. Alcohol, 627,571. Smoking, 1,254,352. Cancer, 2,060,730. Hunger, this is another important one, 2,806,314. You take a look at the numbers and they just don't match up. I'm not saying this is not a bad disease. It is. This is a very, very serious disease. I'm going to be spending a few moments with you in another interaction, another time with you, just to review just the latest that we have on this disease. And I'm not saying that we don't need to take precautions, but yet again, we are missing the critical middle steps, the sentinels in place for all the ports of entry, having the gatekeepers in place for all hospitals and all long-term care facilities. So anybody having cold or flu symptoms gets redirected to and this is the third part that is essential, a decentralized receiving facility. A nice, large, open-air facility for people to come to who have any kind of cold or flu symptoms to be tested and or assessed and either sent home or redirected accordingly to a hospital. Let's protect the people that are most at risk of dying from this disease. Again, this is not a disease that is completely benign, but this is not a level 3 or 4 catastrophic Ebola type disease. We're still learning many things about it, and I understand that. But we're missing the critical middle steps that ultimately could also lead our way back to becoming more prosperous and return to a life that we desperately need to in order to have an economic future and a stability within our own corporate entities as well as our own families. The problem with an economic recession or depression, the likes of which we're now inflicting upon ourselves, is that suicides wind up going up. And they're not going to show up in the hospitals, they're going to show up in the morgues. They're not going to be in the stats as far as the death rate is concerned because we're so focused on COVID-19. Hunger. What do you think is going to happen when you don't have money to buy food? That's not to say our chains of supply are compromised. They're not. We have the grocery stores. They are still fully functional. There's no need to yell, scream, or fight amongst each other for toilet paper or for hamburger. It doesn't matter. The materials, the supplies are still there. We are still safe. We are still stable in that way. But the fact is that we need to ensure a stability across the board that works for everybody, not just the present, but also the future. So those middle steps, absolutely required. Another thing to consider, we've always been advocating for small business to not have a tax placed upon them. Of all the times, this is the most obvious, to remove all taxes on small business. 98% of our businesses are small business. We need to make sure that, as we've been saying all along, especially now, remove that tax. And the other thing to consider is, as we've always said, The money in education should follow where the children go. For those who are homeschooling, they're not gaining any of the support that they definitely need. And of course, students being at home, there is a lot more homeschooling going on. So let's increase the funding and support for those who are engaged in homeschooling. Let's make sure that we don't lose any students in the process. Certainly, there are ways that we can come up with, I think, that can achieve education. It may require teleconferencing in order to achieve that, so that you have teleclassrooms, distance education. It's not unheard of. We've done it for university college levels. We can adapt accordingly. And there's nothing to say that we cannot achieve that in the high school, junior high school levels at the very least. Those are considerations. But again, still, parents need that support because now their children are at home. And it may or may not be true homeschooling. Either way, that support needs to exist. There's more to come soon, Alberta. But I wanted to share those thoughts with you. And I'm going to review the latest that I have from my briefings with medical doctors and from professionals, globally speaking, as well as those who have vested interests in making sure that we're taking care of ourselves. So more to come. Take care.